I went back to a place that almost took my life in some of the roughest water in the United States when I was swimming the last leg on the first swim from Ellis Island, New York City. And we were about 600 or so meters away from New York. I'm slogging it out, right? I'm not a good swimmer. And I took a stroke, and I looked to my left, and I saw where the plane crashed. And I froze.
Welcome to the S Club podcast, where we talk about real life, relationships, and real estate. I'm here with Dave Sanderson, entrepreneur, philanthropist, best-selling author, and survivor of the miracle on the Hudson. Dave is here with us today to share more about his personal story and strategies he uses to create opportunities out of uncertainty. Dave, welcome to the show.
Sarah, thank you for having me today.
Thank you. So we connected. Yep. It feels like it was longer, but it was this past year at CoachCon, Dan Sullivan's first conference. And you were a speaker. I was an attendee. And after I heard your story, I just felt like more people needed to hear about it. It's an incredible story. And I'm excited to have you on today to share with our listeners about some impactful information that they can use in their life.
Well, Sarah, thank you. I was honored to be able to meet you and your brother. It was an amazing event. And I was honored to be asked to speak at the event. It was amazing. So thank you very much.
Sure. So talking about the miracle on the Hudson, can you walk us through those moments during that plane crash, right before it? What was going through your mind? Yeah,
so it's first, nothing out of the ordinary until you heard the explosion. Mm-hmm. Once you heard the explosion, you knew something happened, but still, I fly a lot. I knew planes have multiple engines, so didn't think about both engines going out at the same time, which ultimately we all know that happened. So, up to that point, it was business as usual going back to the airport, but as we started banking, I saw the skyline of Manhattan. It's right out my window. I was eye level with the skyline of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. That's when I knew something was happening. But then when the captain said his famous words, "This is your captain, brace for impact," that's when you knew it was serious. Mm-hmm. And that's when you sort of have to get your head together. That's when, I talk about, when I played sports, you always have to have a game plan. Mm-hmm. And you had to sort of check in with the big guy, right? Mm-hmm. You had to make sure, there's a lot of things in the next 60 seconds you could be dead. Mm-hmm.
Did you think that during that time?
Yeah, I was preparing for that. And people say, well, you're scared? I'm like, no, because candidly, I wasn't fearful because I knew if it did happen, I was going to a greater place. If it didn't happen, I was going home. Yeah. So it really didn't, I wasn't fearful, but it was like, I had regrets. It's like, there's a lot of things in life I still hadn't done yet. And the biggest thing was I wasn't around for my family a lot because I had the mindset, and I've said this on many interviews, I was in the mindset of making money for my family. Mm-hmm. And see, some people don't understand, but my father and mother grew up in the Depression, and there was a model of the world. Mm-hmm. And that was the model I grew up with. And my mom stayed home and had a great influence on me, but my dad was always gone because my mindset was, I've got to make money for my family. Mm-hmm. That was my mindset. But I had regrets because I missed so many things from my elderly kid, my two older kids.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you missed out a lot on that too as a child? Like not having your dad around with working so much? Yeah, my mom was always the mom and dad. She was, even though my dad loved us, he was there, but he was on the road a lot. He was doing what dads did in the 60s, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, we reconciled that later in life. It was because he, after he's retired is when we had those talks, and he told me, he said, "Listen, I know I wasn't around a lot, right?" And I knew before I had kids but I didn't think about it because I was like, I got to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that flight that you took on the Hudson, Flight 1549, you weren't initially supposed to be on that plane. And was it the night before that you made the decision to switch flights?
10 o'clock that morning, I called our travel agent, and she put me on Flight 1549. My strategy back in the sales days was I always take the last direct flight out because you don't know how the day's going to go.
Sure.
So, we started that day, 5 a.m. So I had the 5 o'clock flight because you just don't know how it's going to go. But we got done at about 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, wow, I get to go home early. And that's when I called her. She put me on Flight 1549. I gave up a first-class seat. I had a first-class seat, gave her seat 15A on 1549.
So that decision to switch that flight, does that impact how you make decisions today? Or do you think about that a lot?
I don't think about it a lot, but yes. Because one thing I talk about is, and I think I look at myself as a leader. I think everybody should look at themselves as a leader. But one of the key tenets of being a leader is you got to be able to make a decision, and you got to be able to live with the decision. So I made a decision to make an earlier flight, and I had this conversation yesterday. I was in Canada yesterday, as you know. Someone asked me this, and I said, "Yeah, I've talked to the travel agent who put me on that flight," and she was very regretful, let's say it that way. I told her, I said, no, you didn't know that, right? You were doing your job, I was doing my job, and it's called things happen, right? And fortunately for me, you know, I had a mindset and training that I could, at least if I didn't get physically killed, I could figure out how to get out of it.
And what training was that you had leading up to that?
Well, you know, that's when my first book, Moments Matter, really came about, because what I realized after this is all those moments in my life that I had prepared me for that moment. But I'd say one of the biggest things is when I was head of security for a guy named Tony Robbins. And
we all know.
Yeah,
right?
and you know, and I had proximity. I tell these younger people, I said, if I had to go back and look at this thing again, the one thing I would have done differently, and I was doing it somewhat, but proximity is power. You got to put yourself around people, and I call it the right associations. People get around people and network. It's about, are they the right people? Fortunately, I had proximity with Tony, and he basically took me in. And not only did I travel, I served him and his mission. I was there to serve his mission. But just by being close, you get to learn and about how to manage your mind when all stuff's breaking loose, right? And that, I think that one thing right there, how to manage your mindset, was the biggest thing for me, because when all stuff was breaking loose, and it was breaking loose.
Yeah. So was it very chaotic, or was it?
No, it wasn't chaotic. But, you know, when you're going down and you know it, you can see it, and you can't do anything about it, right? And you know, within 60 seconds, you could potentially be dead. You know that. If you don't manage this, right, and you know, you don't give yourself the best opportunity to have that second chance. And so I knew, and people say, well, how did you do that, right? And there's three ways you do it. There's three strategies you do it. First is, you know, through your physical body. If you change your physiology, you change the way you think. Well, I couldn't get up and run around on a plane.
Sure.
Right? It's going down.
Yeah.
So that wasn't an option. The second option was what's called internal dialogue, the questions I ask myself. And I started talking to myself in positive ways. Like, if I do this, what could I do, right? I'll up out. So I put together. The third way is how the captain did it, the power of focus. Yeah, he's like he said, I mean, he and I have had several conversations, and one of the things that people ask me a lot is like, is he religious? Did he pray? And I asked him, I said, did you pray? He goes, no, I had 154 other people praying for me. I had to focus, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, great strategy.
Yeah.
Because exactly right. When you're in that moment, right, you have to be able to focus in. And you know, when I had the opportunity to be with Schwarzkopf many years ago, he said something like, he said, I had to keep people, remember them, keeping the main thing the main thing.
And what was your interaction with him? Was it through security
Tony,
with
I was
Tony
head of
Robbins?
security. When he had celebrities or special people, I was responsible to make sure their safety and security. So I had the honor to be around people like that, and so you get the opportunity to at least ask questions. And I asked him a question. I was driving him back from Kona Airport to the resort, and I tell people, no one ever asks a 4-star general a question. I mean, this guy done it, right?
Yeah.
And I asked him the question. I said, how did you win the war in Iraq so quickly? And what you learn, and I do this too, so you learn after what? You have a pat answer.
Sure.
Just rolls,
Sure.
right? And I said, sir, can I ask you another question? He goes, no one ever asks a general second question. You got it. He said, but go ahead. I said, how did you really win it? And he looked at me with indignance, like, I'll tell you how I won it. He said, every day I'd go in the theater. Women couldn't drive tanks, they kept saying. They had to pray 5 times a day. I said, how does this contribute to kicking Saddam out of Kuwait? I had to keep people focused on the main thing. Everybody wanted to focus on things that are not important, right? They may be urgent, but not important to the mission. And that was one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. And I talk about that in my books.
Can I read that quote really quick?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. That was one of my favorite parts of your book. So it said, urgent things matter right at that minute. They must be attended to immediately because they scream at us loudly, demanding our attention. That does not mean that something is urgent right now will still matter tomorrow or the day after. If something is truly important, it's always important. It matters tomorrow, the day after, and the week after that. Urgent things shape the current moment. Important things shape our entire lives. Yeah. So have you used that strategy then in life with the urgent and important?
Most definitely. Most definitely. And that's why we talk about I'm building my team out so I can focus on what I do best and I'll focus on the important things. And other people deal with the urgent things. Now, I'm still guilty at times, right?
Sure.
There's sometimes you just have to jump through the hoop and get her done. But no, I mean, these are, that's why I wrote my first book, Moments Matter, because you realize all these moments are there for a reason. And there may be that one defining moment, like it was me on that plane.
Yeah.
That you have to call on that moment when you're 12 years old and something happened. You're like, all right, maybe I've done this before. What did I learn? Go. Because you have to be able to make a call and live with the call. And like the captain did the same thing. He had 4 choices that day, right? He could have, when that happened, first option was to go back into the ocean. He was right there. No one there to rescue him. Not a good option. Second option was to go to Teterboro, the airport in New Jersey. Could have got there. Big buildings, clip one. Third option, get back to LaGuardia. And if you saw the movie Sully, it was proven by his expertise that wasn't really an option. The fourth option. And I tell people, that's how quickly you have to make decisions, because right now life is moving so quickly. Every 15 minutes, this world's changing. When I grew up, it was maybe a couple weeks, a month. Now it's every 15 minutes. There's so much uncertainty in the world. So you got to be able to make a call. And I had to make a lot of calls that day. And hopefully I made the right calls. I'm sure I made some poor calls. But like my mentor Bill told me, you don't have to be right 51% of the time.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. You only have to be right just 1% more, and all of a sudden you're on the winning side.
And you've been fortunate to have a lot of good mentors in your life. You spoke a lot in your book about your mom, Bill, and Tony. What were some of the key lessons that each of these people taught you, or that you can remember?
It's interesting. I never looked at my mom as a mentor until I got Bill.
Sure.
And that's my second book, From Turmoil to Triumphs, about. Because in that book, when I was writing that book, it's about the 12 key lessons my mentor Bill taught me. And I'll share that in a second. But then as I was writing, I'm like, well, my mom taught me that. My mom showed me that. And all of a sudden I realized my mom and dad were teaching me the same things, but you're too close. And that's why I was so honored when Tony put something on the cover of my book and about, mentorship is the most important thing you can have somebody, a mentor. He said, if I didn't have Jim Rohn, I wouldn't be Tony Robbins. So you realize your parents are actually your first mentors, but you're too close, right?
Or you're just by them all the time, so you take it for granted.
Yeah, this is not, and someone else gives you a different angle at it, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Even though it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. And that's what my second book's about. So I was blessed, in 1983, my dad taught me a lot of great lessons. He gave me 30 days to be out of the house after college. So you got to get a job, 30 days, you're out. And one thing I tell people, one of the greatest things my father taught me, be a man of your word. Whatever you say, you better back it up. That was his biggest thing in life. That was his worldview. I figured out. In 30 days, I did not have a job, and I was still in his house. And so he got me helped me get my first job. So I was
what was your first job?
Second assistant restaurant manager at a place called Howard Johnson. Right? I knew nothing about hotel restaurants. I was out of his house. But that turned out to be, probably the linchpin of changing things, because the third stop was in Charlotte, North Carolina. And being a second assistant, you're not working 9 to 5. You're second and third shift guy, right? Which turned out to be the blessing that you didn't realize until later, because there was a gentleman and his wife would come in every night. His name was Bill and her name was Bonnie. He was 77 at that point. Have coffee, ice cream every night, right? We just talk. And it came to a point a couple months later after all this started, as I was dating my future wife. I had no money. I had nothing, right? He said, here, take your girl out on me. He gave me a couple of movie passes. Thanks, that's cool, right? So he was just telling me how your experience was. I was like, yeah, cool. I go to the movies, and I go up to the gentleman. He says, tell Mr. Bill, hey. All right, whatever that means. So I go to the movie. The next day I see Bill. He goes, well, how'd it go? I said, yeah, thank you very much. It was great, but some dude told me to tell you, hey. He goes, yeah, I own that movie theater. He said, by the way, I've owned 80 movie theaters and restaurants through the Carolinas since the 20s.
Wow.
He was a multimillionaire.
And you would have never guessed
He wore
that.
a flannel shirt, drove a pickup truck in the South. And I've heard people call him the Sam Walton of Charlotte. You never know who this guy was. So he started teaching me these things. And fast forward to December 24th, remember like it was yesterday, 1984. He rolls in a little early. He said, I want to show you what I got Bonnie for Christmas. It was a brand new blue Corvette. Now, I had never seen a Corvette, never smelled a Corvette, couldn't spell Corvette. But it was the coolest thing I ever saw, man. When you're 24 years old, a guy, coolest thing you ever see, right? He said, let's jump in, let's take a ride. So we took a ride up and down Woodlawn Road in Charlotte. Came back, I said, Bill, man, Bonnie's going to dig this. He goes, you need one of these. I said, Bill, I'm making $13,000 a year. I can barely afford my rent. He goes, that is your problem. So let me show you how it's going to take to be successful. So for 13 years, he mentored me. He took me under his wing and taught me these lessons. This is what the second book's about, the 12 most important of those lessons. And it was an amazing experience, because one of the things he did, and I actually replicated it now. I just replicated it. I mean, success leaves clues. Why reinvent the wheel when it's successful? Occasionally, he would invite me to his kitchen cabinet meetings. And this kitchen cabinet meetings then was with the CEO of, this was called Nations Bank, but now it's called Bank of America, CEO of First Union, Duke Power, the who's who. And these guys, all in white shirts, would meet at a barbecue house, put their ties in their shirts, put the bib on, eat barbecue, right? And I just sit there and listen to these guys, right? Just talk. And I was absorbing. I was like, wow, this is
What's the proximity again?
Yeah, I was
being around these people.
So I was around this. So one of the questions my companies never asked me. I mean, I was dying for someone to ask me, but no one did. So I never offered it up until I read my books. How did you get in front of all these people? It's because I've actually had experience on being around these people. I wasn't afraid. Most people are afraid to call somebody.
Yeah. The confidence he taught you. Yeah.
But fast forward to April of 1997, he called me. He said, I want to come over to my office. I need to see you right now. So I run over to his office. He said, I want to tell you a couple things. First, I got lung cancer. Now, Bill smoked unfiltered Camels since the 20s. Surprising, not shocking, right? But then he went over to his desk and pulled out all these pieces of paper and put them on my lap right here on my right leg. I said, what is this? He goes, these were the handwritten notes I wrote in 1929 on how I was going to be successful. I want to give this to you. But you have to promise me one thing. I said, what? You do not let it die with you. And he passed away in September of that year. Last time I saw him in person. So what do I do, Sarah? Nothing. I don't do anything. I put him away, right? And until I start writing my book, Moments Matter, I found him. And I was ashamed of myself.
Had you ever read them before, or did you just put it right
Oh,
in your
yeah.
pocket?
When I just read them, but I put them away, right? Life goes on.
Sure.
But the thing that really got me was, the lesson my dad, be a man of your word. I gave a promise. I had fulfilled it. And that's why you see what I'm doing right now. Because this is me fulfilling the promise from 1997. And so one of the points, when I speak, and you've heard me speak, I think you even said it that, the one thing that every person, every leader needs to be able to do is mentor somebody. You're not a leader unless you mentor somebody. You got to leave with somebody else. I am emphatic on that. So that's...
Do you have people that you mentor now then?
Yeah, and I've made a commitment to 25. This is where I'm building my team. We were talking about this a little few minutes ago. I have committed to mentor 40 people next year. I'm going to take 40 people through this immersion. He did it over a 13-year period. I'm going to take it to 1 year, and also replicate not the lunches, but I'm doing quarterly dinners and bringing a person of influence, in, so they can sit with somebody and hear a different perspective. Like, give you an example. The next one we're doing is in December coming up. And it's going to be Teresa Easler from Strategic Coach. I'm bringing my group to Toronto. And they're going to sit with Teresa for a 3-hour dinner, and she's going to basically lay it out for them. Where, it's hard to get access to people like that. So I give people access to like I give an access. It's a part of what I do in mentoring. I think it's a tremendous benefit because, they can hear me and they can hear all, but when they hear from a Teresa or an Amy Porterfield or somebody like that, and they can hear different perspectives on different areas of life. Wow. Now you have access.
And your mom, I just love some of the stuff that she taught you in that book. And one of them was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. How has that been a pillar of how you lead today and go through life? Yeah,
I thank you for that. I think, she would tell me that when I was a kid, it would just roll off the back, right? Yeah, right. Until the critical moment, right?
So in that moment, remembered what she said. So how did you apply that? So what did you do that was the right thing?
So I was getting ready to go out. I was just ready to get out of the plane. It was sinking, right? And I heard her say that. And I tell people, I grew up in a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, where everybody knew everybody and everybody, took care of everybody. So that's why I went towards the back of the plane and started helping people, and that was how I became the last passenger out. But then, I go to the next day. You're just in a haze at this point in time. I mean, you're on every TV show in the world and everything, so you're just going through it. When I get back, and two of my kids rode home with me from the airport. Now, I lost my keys, so my daughter fortunately remembered to get my fob. And we got in the car. I sat there for a second, and my eldest daughter, she looked at me. She's like, "Dad, are you okay?" Because she thought, "Is he okay?" Yeah. I said, "Yeah." I said, "You know what I realized right now? Grandma was right. If you do the right thing, he does take care of you." So pretty much everything that I do is based on what is the right thing in this moment. And it may not be the best thing for me. But once again, I go back to one of the things that I learned from my mentor. You only got to be right 51% of the time. But if I do it right by other people, it does come back to me somewhere. You don't know, it may not be financially, right? Maybe an introduction to a Sarah, right? You never know. You never know who you're going to be introduced to. Like we were talking about Chad Jenkins, right?
Yeah.
maybe that was one of the things that came back to me.
Sure.
Because I put out.
Sure.
So
yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to be at that moment.
No.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Nope. No, it may come back to you, 2 or 3 years later, maybe 10 years later. But it will come back if you do the right thing. So that pretty much guides everything that I do in the decision making, especially with my company. We're going to do the right thing by somebody. Now, sometime in business, people are not going to do the right thing by you. We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? They got to live with their values, right?
So what are some of your core values?
Most we want to be authentic. What you see from me is what you're going to get. And second, we are going to be honest, and we are going to fulfill our promises. That's one of the things we definitely focus on. But one of the things we want to make people understand that we're here for your success. All right, so I don't know how we're actually rewriting how we're going to phrase this on our sheet. But I think we want trust, we want all that stuff. But I want people to understand when they work with us, you go get authenticity from us. You'll get exactly what what you see is what you get. You're not going to have any ambiguity. Say it that way, right? It is what it is, and we're going to do right by you. So those are some of the key things that my team focuses on, and just some of the core things like we will get back to you within an hour. Well, somebody will. It may not be the answer you want, but so responsiveness, major thing is responsiveness, right? And so we look at faith at a different perspective. Like faith is giving thanks to something bigger than yourself. So we every day, everything we do, we look at gratitude as a major part of our company. So we're going to give thanks for everybody we're around because they're putting our life for a reason or purpose, and hopefully it's going to serve both of us.
Well, I love learning about people's morning routines.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like very successful people have routines. Yep. What is your morning routine?
Thank you for asking because I get up every morning at 3:50 a.m.
I did get a text from
you. Yep.
It was around that time.
Yep, yep. Yeah. I'm up at 3:50 a.m.
No matter where you are, because you travel a lot too.
I travel a lot. Like I was again this morning, right? And because I believe the first thing you have to take care of is yourself. You have to take care of yourself. And
Had you always done that?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do you feel like that was maybe a byproduct of after the miracle on the Hudson? That's something that maybe you did more?
Not that. It really came when I made the commitment to swim with the Navy SEALs and raise money. Because I made a commitment and I didn't know how to swim like they knew how to swim, so I had to be up and be in the pool by 4:50 in the morning. But I do it now because it's a great routine. Because I tell people I'm like the U.S. Army. I get more done by 7 o'clock than anybody else does during the day. Going by 7, I pretty much got I can focus on what's important. Right.
So gratitude is a part of that.
Most definitely. Okay. Gratitude every morning. Body comes first, right? And I'm really into longevity because you and I both probably we go through the same program. I got 139 as my target age, right? And I got this on my board, and my wife looks at me. She's like, "You're crazy. There's no one." I said, "You know who died last week?" She goes, "No." I said, "The oldest lady in the United States died last week in Houston at 121. That's only 18 years, right? By the time we're going."
With all the advancements.
All the advancements. So I'm into longevity too, so I do a lot of longevity things. But also, it's like we all know I'm not even halfway through my life yet, so I'm acting like a 40-year-old. Right? Do
you feel more fulfilled in life now than you did before?
Most definitely. That's a great word to use. Is happiness and fulfillment. I talk about those are the two things people really want. Those two things, and it's hard to get both of them. You can be happy but not fulfilled, right? Or the opposite. You can be fulfilled, but is it really serving me? I'm happy. So, and none of us are perfect. We're all striving, right? We're all learning every day. But like I've learned years ago, change is inevitable. Progress is not, right? It's going to change, but are you making progress? And that's how we rate ourselves. Did we make progress this week? Have we made progress? It's been a winning week.
So what would be a winning week for you?
Well, like this week, we had a winning week. Number one, I'm with you on this. This is a winning week. I got to be in front of 80 executives from around the world in Vancouver. I got to go to that's a winning. We got 2 new coaching clients. That's a win. My team got paid. That's a big win. That's a gain. Right? I mean, all these little things, right? You don't just take for granted. No, these are all wins. Because my personal coach and I talk about, first thing we open up is what's the gains from this last month? We talk about the gains. And sometimes you don't even think about the gains you have. Like, the magazine, or my magazine Moments Matters, coming out tomorrow with a guy by the name of Chris Voss. That's going to be a huge win this week.
Yeah, Chris
right?
was, oh my gosh, he was so good at Coach Con.
And so that's why people need to go to things like this, because you get proximity.
Yeah.
And now,
just around different people.
Yeah, and different mindsets. You know, I mean, I'm much more open now than I ever was. People ask me, what's the biggest thing you learned out of the Miracle on the Hudson? That was it. Be less judgmental. Because I would say with confidence I was pretty judgmental. I used to size somebody up pretty quick, and people say, that's not. I said, well, you know, you got to remember, I grew up in the '60s. My dad, every night when you turn on TV in the '60s, you saw the Vietnam War and what he would call long-haired hippie freaks, right? So he judged. My grandfather judged. So I had judgment, but then I saw something happen on Good Morning America that triggered me to say, you know what, if I could change that one thing. This is because one of the things I do every quarter, it's been a tremendous thing for me, is I do a new habit every quarter. I do a habit tracker. Every quarter I do one new habit. And this is we're going way back to 2009. This is the habit went in. Be less judgmental. And that was how I worked on. And I said, until I know somebody's backstory, I will not make any judgments on them. Because I judged this guy really quick, and I found he was going through a divorce, and he just lost his job. And I said, I judged him pretty quick. And I'm like, Martin Luther King was right. Just judge people by the content of their character. That one has changed my entire life, that one habit.
Well, you think of, too, when you were on that plane crash, right, after it was done and everything had kind of subsided, were you judged for certain things that happened that day?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Some of it was surprising to me. And I'll tell you exactly one of the things that surprised me the most, even though I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming because here's the backstory to the backstory, okay? So the only person that called me in the hospital that night was Tony Robbins. My company didn't call me. Worse off, they didn't call my wife.
And they knew about it, obviously.
They knew about it. Yeah. I was on company time. Yeah. At least call the wife, right?
How long were you with that company?
I just left them last August. The full-time towards what I'm doing. But at the end of that conversation, you can go out on YouTube and actually see part of that conversation. It was tremendous because he got me 4 or 5 hours after a plane crash. And my mind was still in that mode, right?
It's a traumatic experience.
He said, when you get to L.A., call me. So I was going to the Bonnie Hunt show, Ellen, and all these shows. So I was on the way to L.A. I said, I'm going to be in L.A. next couple of days. He says, when you get there, call me. He's in Palm Springs. So I called him when I got there, and we had a 3-hour conversation. He was coaching me on what to expect, what's going to happen, right? All these things, right? Be ready for all these things. So now you're in the limelight, right? And one of the things he told me, it came true. He said, there will be people taking swipes at you. Even through all this, someone will take a swipe at you, right? Somewhere. And that happened about 1.5 years, 2 years later. And what happened was some of the other passengers got jealous of what I was doing.
Well, you created the opportunity, though. I mean,
this
is what we talk about in the book.
I created the opportunity. But they saw it as, there's no one else should be making money except for the captain. Why are you making money off of this? I'm like, because I have a message. I said, and I got a little indignant. I'm like, but you had the same opportunity.
Yeah. So why do some people take opportunities and other people shy back?
Fear. They're afraid they're going to fail, right? They're afraid they're going to fail. And I think, it's amazing to see people because they have it right in front of them. And I was guilty of it. I've for many years, right? But I take the step. But I tell you, the moment when it shifted, I can know exactly the moment it shifted for me. I was in Fiji. And one of the things we did in Fiji, in the middle of the night, we drive up a mountain, get on this bridge, which is where the bridge thing came in too, right? Get on top of a bridge, and you're going to jump into this salt lagoon. In the middle of the night, you can't see anything. And you have to trust yourself, right? And it's like, and if you don't hit it right, you're going to float out into the ocean in the middle of the night, and you're done, right?
So did anybody decline to do this, or do you have to do it if you're there?
You're pretty much...
You're doing it.
Yeah, you're called a name if you're not, okay. Right? I'll say it that way, right?
Sure.
And I knew at that point I did it, right? Yeah. And I was struggling a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But that was a moment, you have to face your fear. And that's part of my new talks about. You have to, and that's one of the reasons I went back into the Hudson River. Yeah. Not only to raise money for our special operations and Navy SEAL heroes. That's a real reason I did it. But I wanted to really show my kids and the youth that you have to face your fears. I went back to a place that almost took my life. in some of the roughest water in the United States.
Was that a healing moment for you when you did that?
I tell you when the healing moment was, exactly. And I think you may have heard this, when I was swimming the last leg on the first swim from Ellis Island to New York City. And we were about 600 or so meters away from New York. I'm slogging it out, right? I'm not a good swimmer. My wingman's with me, Suzanne. She's a Navy captain in the United States Navy. And I took a stroke, and I looked to my left, and I saw where the plane crashed. I knew exactly where it was because it's right there at Port Imperial, that area right there, where the Intrepid is. And I froze. And I tell people, it's not good to freeze in 80 feet of water, right? You got to keep moving. But that's when I realized what it takes for you to get to any point in your life. You have to have other people that care about you. And that's when I realized the whole thing, as we talk about, the whole thing's wrapped with gratitude. I don't know how people go through life without giving thanks to something. How do they do it? There are a lot of takers in this world, right? And you know what? There'll be a moment. Right?
So that swim that you do,
Yep.
I know we talked a lot about, people taking opportunities.
Yep.
The opportunities that you've done have also been for great causes to raise money. You've raised over $14 million for the Red Cross.
Right.
Incredible. And you wouldn't have done that had the Hudson not happened, correct?
No.
Is that how you got connected with the American Red Cross?
Yeah, they were there 3 times in about a 14-hour time span with me and my family. And that's where I got my connection. I was always giving blood. But that was my connection. But then how it took off is a couple months later, I think it was maybe March or April, I get a phone call from their CEO. And she said, would you come, we're having a fundraising event, would you come and just say a few words? I said, Pam, of course. You were with my family, of course. Whatever you need. So I went, and they raised $120,000 that day for me speaking. And all of a sudden, my name got out. And all of a sudden, I knew that I could have impact.
I was going to say, did you know at that moment?
I knew at that moment I could.
What type of impact you could have?
I could have an impact. And so I've spoken, over, I think, 180 times for the Red Cross around the world, primarily North America, and raised a lot of money just by being able to, because I could share the story from authenticity. So you see a lot of stuff on TV. Does Trace Atkins really, he may or may not, I don't know, But I was in the middle of it. And they served me 3 times. When we got to the shore of New Jersey, when they got me clothes and I had nothing to wear, and when my family was by themselves. 3 Red Cross. So that's how that started. All of a sudden, I'm speaking all over the country in North America for them, raising money, which I'm still passionate about. I love to do that. But now I also do it for special operations. And
how did you get connected with the special operations? It's the Honor Foundation, correct?
Honor Foundation. It started out with my friend Suzanne's the captain of the Navy, asked me if I would swim with her from New Jersey to New York. I'm like, intriguing, but I don't know. So I signed up to do it, all right? And I had swam for 40 years. So part of my talk is I show people how they can get any outcome you want in 100 days. I can show you how to do it. I've done it over and over. This is a visible way to do it. But that's how it started. And I raised a lot of money for the Navy SEAL Foundation. Now I've expanded that over the last couple of years. So it was just Navy SEALs. Now it's Special Ops in San Diego for the Honor Foundation. People who are transitioning out have fallen on hard times because the suicide rate is average of 22 military people commit suicide a day. Jeez. It's out of control, and that's what got my attention. What can I do to help either reduce or stop that? At least I can raise money, and what the Honor Foundation does is put money directly towards that cause, educating the ones that are transitioning out so they have a pathway.
And is it always, did you know you'd be swimming in the Hudson? Is that where it always is?
The SEAL one is always in the Hudson.
Okay.
Special Ops is in Coronado Bay.
And what's the difference? The
waters?
waters?
Almost definitely.
Okay, so they do it based
Hudson
on-
is much rougher. You have 2 stops. Coronado Bay is Pacific Ocean, really cold, and 1 stop. And it's people. So I just did it again this year. Right? I just did it a couple months ago, September, and someone finally asked me, "Which one's tougher?" Right? And I thought about it for a second. I said, they're tough on both. All of them are tough. But I think one of the Coronado Bay is a little tougher because at least on the Hudson you get to stop twice and take a breath.
Sure.
When you're out in the middle of 2.2 miles from Coronado Bay straight to the USS Midway in San Diego, and there's nothing except
You're not
Pacific
stopping.
Ocean, right? You ain't stopping. So it's all relative. But I'm blessed to be able to do. I've relearned how to swim, and I think one of my big passions now is making sure kids know how to swim.
Yeah. Did you, when the plane crash happened, did you know how to swim at that time? I know you mentioned some of your prior experience kicking in when you were a Boy Scout.
Yep.
And you chose to swim to the events, not walk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that served me. I knew how to swim. I knew if you talk to my coach, her name's Coach Patty, I didn't know how to swim. I just stayed above water.
Sure.
She was right? And I know now more technically how to swim now.
Sure.
Back then, I could make it across water, right? And that saved my life, having to swim from the plane to the end of the wing. I tell people it's the longest 15-yard swim of my life. Yeah. So.
And this year for the Honor Foundation, you swam for Special Sergeant Cole Condiff.
Yeah.
Who was he, or what can you share with us about him?
Yeah, every year I swam for somebody. Last year I swam for a gentleman who committed suicide. He's a U.S. Army sergeant out of Colorado, and I knew his wife, and I took his patch with me and carried it with me. This year I was given Sergeant Condiff, and I heard his story. He was Air Force Special Forces, right? So he's a tough dude. And he was on his way back from his deployment in Afghanistan and Africa, and unfortunately perished. So I carried it with me, right? And I swam to raise money, not just for him, but just in the memory of thanking him for what he did to save what we did for our country. And I do that every year. Like the one last year, I was given that one because she asked me if I would do it. This year they gave it to me. I said, yeah, I'm honored to do it because these young men and women have given their lives, right? And, I think we forget about them after a few days.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that just being that kind person that you are? I saw that right away when I met you. Is that something that you were taught as well from your parents?
Most definitely. That was my mom's thing. It doesn't cost you anything to be nice.
Yeah.
She always say that. It doesn't cost you anything to be nice because there are times you get surly when you're a kid. I mean, I'm sure you weren't.
Oh, I was.
I'm sure I said, but everybody's not pixie dust and sunshine all the time, right?
Yeah.
But she always, it doesn't cost you anything to be nice. So I'm always nice. And sometimes my family look at me like, why do you talk to everybody? It's because, you know what? You didn't want to get to meet people. But second, it doesn't cost anything to be nice, right? Especially flight attendants. I love my flight attendants. Talk to them all the time. So yeah, I just think that you, if you show people, you got to be able to be, like I said, authentic. You got to be able to be congruent. See, one of the things that I learned from Tony, and this is where a lot of people fall down. What people are looking for in another person is someone congruent. And what does that mean? Well, some people may put on a front, right? They might put on a beautiful face, or they may talk about their money, but are they holistic? Do they walk their talk? And this is what we're looking for our leaders now. They're not walking their talk, right?
Yeah.
They're not walking their talk. And this is why, you look back, is why there's so much division in the country. And you can't even have a conversation. So one of the things I just strive on, in fact, when I was in Canada, I was with a young lady, and she saw me 7 years ago, and she saw me speaking in Vancouver 7 years ago. She goes, "You're really different." And I'm like,
and she was at the event you were saying yesterday? Okay.
Yes. And she's actually she put it on, I think, LinkedIn today, pictures of her and me and 7 years ago. She goes, "You're different. You have a different energy, a different look." I said, because my goal now is to be congruent, which means whatever I do in my business also ties to my physical, ties to my spiritual, ties to my relationships, ties to my finances.
It's all tied together.
All tied together. That's what I coach when I mentor and coach people. I said, okay, we're not, because everyone wants to get that business outcome, and I can show you how to do that. But that's how we give you fulfillment, right?
I love that she said that to you, though, because I feel like a lot of times we make changes, but we don't see it right away.
Yep.
And then when somebody like that comes along and notices that you're a completely different person.
Yeah.
It's just...
That's what happened after the plane crash, right? That was, people ask me all the time, was that the defining moment? I said, people think that was a defining moment, but it really wasn't the defining moment. It came about 10 days later. So. And
you had to get on a flight the next day, correct? How did you do that?
Well, that was actually an easy one because they were just telling me what to do. My mind was very candidly, my mind was so out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Did you suffer from any post-traumatic stress?
I actually had what's called PTGS, post-traumatic growth, the other direction. The toughest flight was the next week when my company asked me to fly to Michigan on business. And I hadn't flown except for that one they got me home on. And I was, go. And it's like, do I go or not? And they put me on Delta. Now, I love Delta, but I was a rock star on US Airways, right? They knew who I was. They were taking great care of me. I mean, I was like, see, all 155 of us were like an asset to them then, right? I mean, they could hold us up and say, look what happens when we take. But I was nobody on Delta. And they put me in the last row in a little rocky flight to, up to Western Michigan. And all of a sudden, I'm not freaking out, Sarah, but the flight attendant noticed that I wasn't feeling really good. She came back and talked to me. She recognized me from the TV interviews. And the captain came back, started talking me through it. And that's the moment I sort of got over it. But yeah, that second flight, horrible. But you have to get through it. Yeah. You have to face your fears.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part too, is doing, like when you do it right away, it's easier versus if you prolong something like that.
There's still many people from that day haven't got on the plane. Still many people.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't know that. I just assumed, right? But I was invited to be on a show called Oprah in Chicago. And I was in Dallas speaking, and I got this phone call. Can you be in Chicago tomorrow at 1 o'clock for taping of Oprah? I'm like, yeah, right? Of course.
Of course.
Right? So I changed everything. I get to Chicago, right? I get to this place, and there's about 25 other passengers too in the crew. That's fine. But all of a sudden, I was talking to somebody, and they put her on a train from New York. She won't ever get back on a plane. I came back to Charlotte with a lady. I was her first flight, and she was terrified. She was holding my arm the whole time. So I realized there's a lot of people still haven't got back on a plane. Yeah, it's still in their heads, and this is why it's all about that mindset. How do you build resiliency? That's the question I get all the time. How do you get back on a plane? And I said, what that question is, how do you build the resiliency to bounce back, and embrace it, so you can find the opportunity out of it, and then transform. That's what happens. But you have to first face it and embrace it. Many people today don't want to embrace uncertainty. It's easy to blame events, but if you keep blaming events, you never give yourself the opportunity to grow.
I feel like a lot of us like stability and more of that constant.
Yeah, certainty. See, there's 6 basic needs. The first need is the need for certainty. That's what most people want. My wife lives on certainty.
I like certainty.
She loves certainty, right? But what happens is you get so much certainty, then you have no variety, right?
It's boring.
It's boring.
It does get boring.
It's boring, right? And this is one of the things I teach and talk about. So, people want that certainty, but you got, you have so much certainty in life that it's boring. You don't grow. Yeah. You don't grow.
I like certainty so much that every week I have to track, like in my journal, I do my gap and my gain every week. And then I do spontaneity and adventure, just to make sure I'm incorporating that in there, for some variety. Whether it's ordering something different from a restaurant or taking a different route, walking in a different place, it really makes the week better.
Yeah, yeah, and it's and then one of the first things I do when I'm interviewing is go through what's called the 6 primary needs. And the first needs is for certainty. So I didn't help them. What is your primary need of that? Where do you go to when all stuff's breaking loose, right? And for many years, very candid, it's called significance. Because I was an achiever. If I didn't win the award every month, I was a loser. So I was like striving. And that's great until what happens?
That gets taken away.
Well, what happens is these other people aren't winning, so you can't have any connection. So for many years, I didn't have any connection with my teams because I was always about me. Yeah. And that's the biggest change when you look at how I view the work. Because now it's really focused on contribution and growth.
Not the competition piece. No,
I mean, it's not about me anymore. And, I reference back to a movie. I don't know if you watch Marvel movies. I love Marvel movies. Called Doctor Strange. And it's right when the Anointed One was ready to go. She's ready to leave this earth, right? And he's there with her. He says, don't go. And he goes, Stephen, you don't get it. It's not about you. That was a light bulb. Yeah. Right? Because everybody thinks it's about them. Yeah. You have to be right. You got to let go of needing to be right to do the right thing. You have to, or you're never going to grow. You're going to drive people away, and if you start driving people away, then it happens. You don't have proximity. You don't have proximity, what happens? You're not growing.
Did you feel like your relationships are a lot better?
Most definitely.
Yeah. With your kids too?
Yeah, all the kids. Because I don't know if you ever had a 16-year-old daughter.
Never.
Yeah. She really didn't like her mom and dad too much, all right? I mean, and I had a lot to do with it because I wasn't home a lot. All right, so, okay. At that point, you don't know. But, that changed because, number one, she's the one that got the call when I was in a plane crash. My wife was doing mom stuff. So she got the call. So she had to take ownership, right? But the one that changed it is after when I got back the next day and I got to the airport and I was doing all these interviews. She was with me and my third daughter was with me. And I did an interview with People magazine. And then about a month later, I was in People magazine. She was too. And all of a sudden, she had street cred. I remember in high school, she had street cred. But second, and she told us, I realized my dad is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, it's that proximity.
Right.
When somebody's so close to you, you don't realize it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she was just one of those girls. I mean, I think everybody goes through 16, 17, 18, right? They just hate their parents.
Yeah.
So, but that was the biggest change. She said Dad was cool. Mm-hmm. That's a great compliment to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather be cool.
Right.
I like to be cool. Yeah.
So you had an interaction with a pilot in, I think it was Florida, you mentioned, and he had told you some fundamental principles that he learned while he was at flight school: aviate, navigate, and communicate.
Yep.
How do you use those principles in your life?
When I learned that from him, it was like a light bulb went off. I said, "This is like the strategy right here, right?" And of course, the way he talked about it in aviation terms, but aviate. You got to keep your plane up, right? Number one thing, keep the plane up, so you can do number two, navigate, figure out the game plan. How am I going to get it down? And third, effective communication, not only with outer people but internally. So I applied this to my business, and this is what happened during COVID. The people who won in COVID kept their plane up, kept their business going long enough to figure out, how do I adapt? Which means I got to do Zoom, I got to do other things, right? And then communication, right? The biggest challenge of COVID was you didn't have any connection. So the people who figured out how to use the technology and how to communicate effectively, not only them, but more importantly yourself, right? Now you're supposedly all, I don't know about here where you're living, we were pretty much locked in, right?
Yeah, same
pretty much
here.
locked in, right? So I went out every day for a 5-mile walk so I could talk to myself, right?
Just to get out of the house.
Just get out. I was going crazy, right? So aviate, navigate, communicate, I think is one of the greatest strategies. And it's pretty basic, but if you just realize, that's what the captain did. He kept the plane up long enough to figure out, okay, I got it. And then within a 30 seconds, I got 4 options. I'm going to do this with go, right? You navigate it, and then all of a sudden, only thing you communicate outwardly, this is your captain, brace for impact, right? Effective, short, understandable. And then I'm sure internally he was like, okay, I got to keep my mind now, right? Same thing. Beautiful. It was a great strategy and pretty basic. But I think everybody can apply it in their lives.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what would you like to be known for as far as your legacy in the philanthropy that you do? I
just want people to understand that, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. We all are, the biggest joy in life is the joy of giving. See, the 6 primary needs, the last need is the need to contribute. Everybody has that need, but I feel, that one, when I started focusing on how can I give? What can I do to help other people? Because what you do, I think one of the greatest things that happened to me, and I don't know if it's happened to you, but I tell my kids this, you got to travel outside this country and see what other people are going through. And, you understand, you got it pretty fortunate. You think you got a problem? Let me show you what the problem is. Let's go to Ethiopia for a couple minutes, right?
Did you take them out of the country?
I haven't taken them out of the country yet. No, they don't have their passports yet. But that's when I started to open my eyes. When I started traveling, it's like, you know what? I'm pretty lucky. Some of these people, I remember one kid I talked to because he helped me in something. All he did, his job for the day is get up, walk down, get water, come home. And that's his day, just to have water. And we take it for granted. Yeah. So I tell everybody, but young people especially, travel. Understand what other cultures are going through. See, one of the things I think one of the biggest, I know about here in the school systems here, at least where I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, they don't teach geography anymore. And I think that was the most important thing because you got to understand what other cultures do, right? You got to understand history and behind it, but the cultures, understand why they think the way they do. And all of a sudden, and when you start traveling, and then you get to live it, and it's like, wow, how blessed am I to have a house? Yeah. So, I think my biggest legacy is, I just want to be known as somebody who's like, you know what, put himself second, give somebody else the opportunity to have their victory. Like I talked to my book, turn their turmoil into triumph, right? That's what I really want to be hopefully known for, helping people turn their turmoil into triumph.
Yeah, I feel like generosity is something that I look for now, like in relationships. I can't be around people who aren't generous or giving.
Yeah, it really bothers me.
Yeah.
And I notice it very quickly, and I try to disassociate myself. One of the books I'm reading right now, and my coach gave it to me. He said, you need to read this book. It's called Necessary Endings.
Okay.
And because I was asking somebody about somebody that I'm no longer connected to. And he said, you need to read this book because we all need to have those, because if someone doesn't align with your values and this, You got to have a necessary ending. So some people just don't need to be in our lives, right? Like you said, right now, generosity is a big thing with you. You know, you can figure out pretty quick if somebody giving or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you feel like you've changed your circle over the past
Almost
couple years?
definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And strategic coach helped me tremendously on one of the things. I mean, one of the first things in the first year, which you and I both been through, I realized that I had a great person in the wrong place, and she wasn't serving, and I was frustrated. Why isn't this lady serving? Right. Well, she wasn't in the right job. That wasn't her unique ability. I put her in my unique ability instead of hers.
And did you move her to a different role then?
I moved her out. I moved her out. Now I do some work with her contracting now, but you know, I realized that's how important that model is, right? You got to find somebody's unique ability and make sure they're earning the right things so they can serve not only you but serve the greater good. And now that's one of the greatest things I've learned with Coach. And that happened the first year, first session, and I got called out. You know, and
so what is your unique ability?
It is being able to articulate a message succinctly. And when I talk about I can show people how to compress decades into days, which means I can show you strategies to be able to take whatever outcome you want and get to that end in a simplified manner. That's my gift. So through speaking, I tell stories. And the reason I tell stories, I can show people through that story how I learned something, but also how you too can do whatever challenge you may have. Wow, if I use this strategy for this, you know, like casuals.
Can you break one down or give an example of something
I
like
love
that?
to. The one of my favorite ones, I talk about this every time. It's called Casualties to Casualties. And I learned this when I got invited to speak on the safety day at NASA. Now, I grew up in the 60s, and every little boy and every little girl wanted to be an astronaut, right? Coolest thing, right? Go to space. So when I got this call, I was over the edge, right? And we were talking money and everything. I said, listen, money's important. Cover my expenses, but I want to be an astronaut for a day. And that was what my agreement was. So I spoke in the morning for expenses. In the afternoon, I got to be an astronaut. And the first thing I got to do is go to a room and where they have the remains of the space shuttle Challenger, right? The one that crashed, right? And it's a sacred room, the remains. And so there's one guy that owns it. And he wanted to learn about me. I wanted to learn about what happened, right? And he looked at me and said something that triggered this. And it was one of the greatest things I learned. That's one of the things I always talk about. He goes, listen, Apollo 1 doesn't happen. Apollo 1, if you're not old enough, was the first Apollo with 3 astronauts burned up. If that doesn't happen, we don't go to the moon. And at first I looked at him like, I didn't understand, like, what do you mean? He goes, listen, you got to remember. Now, what's this one of the things about, I challenge these younger people especially. They judge people based on, you know, whatever their mindset is, maybe in the 30s. That was the mindset in the 30s. You can't judge people today on the 30s values.
Sure.
So he said, you got to look back in the 60s, NASA was everything. Because it was John Kennedy's mission, the president's mission. We're going to the moon and back safely. That's the mission. So we had more money we knew to do with. And all of a sudden we got casual. And that casualness led to casualties. He said, this happens out in outer space, same thing. If it blows up, we don't go to the moon, they stop it. And so I started thinking, that's a great metaphor for life, because if you get casual with a relationship, you break up. You casual with your money, what happens? You go broke, right? How about you get casual with your business? Someone else takes it. You can't be casual. You got to be able to focus and have a game plan. You have to be able to stay on target, because life is moving too fast now. So I implore people, don't be casual with, especially relationships. I mean, I've been stupid with money. I'm sure you haven't, but I've been stupid with money many times, right? I've lost, gain, right? Thought I had enough in my pocket, and like it had a hole in my pocket. It's going right out, right? But more importantly, relationships. Because you get casual, they go sideways pretty quick.
Yeah. I chose for a lot of years of my life to place work, you know, over relationships, and completely different now the past, I would say 5 years since I've really focused on that. I mean, you have to put stuff into a relationship to get something out.
Yeah, you got to give first. Zig Ziglar is right. You give first, right? It comes back tenfold. So that one message that I talk about, I think can serve everybody. Whether you're a young person that you're growing up and you realize, you know, I can't get casual with my grades, right? So,
And then you fly now. Do you ever go back to that seat 15A again?
I've never been back to 15A. I've been
Yeah.
booked in 15A, and
Okay.
I call my special numbers and listen, I want to move. They said, why? That was the seat that I was involved in the plane crash. That seat's retired.
Yeah.
And so they usually accommodate me. But no, I've never been back in that seat since. Never been back in that seat. It's one of those things that in my video, I show that seat from the plane, right? Because one of the things I got to do right after is when the plane got to Charlotte, I got to take my family inside the plane. They could see exactly what it looked like, where the water lines were and everything, right? And the seats were all, torn up. And each one of my kids got to sit in that seat. And it moved them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm retired.
Yeah.
So no, nope.
And what's one thing that you wish I would have asked today that I didn't?
Wow. Well, a lot of people want to know is how does Dave pull all this off, right? Because it's like, they say, we talk about, I do a lot of things. It's like, it's because of what we talked about at the beginning. I'll go full circle. Because I finally figured out 63 years later that I need to focus on what's important, what's important for me first, and take care of me first. So I would say, that's the question. Like people never usually ask. They usually ask, about, how do you get back on a plane? That's basic stuff. It's like, how did you get this mindset?
Yeah.
How did you do it, right? And it comes back to proximity is power. I intentionally put myself in place because one of the lessons my dad taught me, which I have never written about, he said, you don't have to own everything, but you have to know somebody who owns that. He said, that's the key. And he was right. Because that gave me the lesson. I got to put myself around people who have something. And so I'll leave you with this. So one of the things I teach in my leadership course, there's a formula that I came up with. How do you do this, right? And it was primarily focused on sales because I was a sales guy for 37 years. And it's called P. You got to understand your purpose. Why am I doing this? Then you add the T, plus T, which means what talent. What do you bring to the table talent-wise or competency-wise? You take that together and you multiply it by taking massive action, MA, the massive action. Not just action, because everybody takes action, massive action. Or like Tony Robbins says, you burn the boats, like you go into poker, you push all the chips in. But the one most people miss is this. This is the one that Bill taught me. Okay, this is where I came up with this. He didn't put it this way, so I just started putting it together. Because you get a result, and you can make a good money. But here's the difference. You take all that together and multiply by RA, the right associations. See, most of us have associations and relationships, but are they the right ones? And that's one of the biggest learning lessons I've had, how to get around the right people, right? Because once you find the right people, and you do all these other steps, it explodes. As we know now, in our world we live in, the coach, this is when it explodes, right? It's when you have the right associations. And that's one of the things we're learning together in this is, we have associations, that's great, but are they the right ones for you? So I talked about a few minutes ago, the book my mentor told me to go get and read,
Did you start reading that? Or?
I just started this week when I was on the road, Necessary Endings. And it's coming together for me. Why? There's sometimes in life you have to say, I love you and I got to move on. You're not going to grow. And you may not be the right association right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Or it was a season, like a lot of relationships might be for a season in life.
So the RA is the one that really helped me take off in a different direction because I was doing all the other ones. Yeah. And I was making good money. It was the RA the one that exploded for me.
So we're going to end the podcast. I ask a question to every guest, and this will resonate more with you because we work with Dan Sullivan. So he asks the R Factor question. So if we were sitting here for a year from now, what would need to happen either personally or professionally for you to feel like you made progress?
For me to feel progress in 1 year, I would want to be able to build my team to a point where I can start focusing on the future instead of the present company, which in our terminology means now versus the future. But build a team so they understand the mission, they can execute the mission so I can be more focused. And we're not focusing on 10xing the business next year. We're focusing on 5xing the business, maybe actually about 2.5, 3 times because we doubled it this year. So it'd be
Congrats.
5 times. But yeah, so that means be able to impact 40 people. So I'm looking for 40 people right now that want to go on the journey with me for 1 year. I've taken this, what I've done is taken all these years from Bill and Tony, cut it down to where in 1 year I can do immersion. Because one of the biggest challenges people have is they go to something and they get out. It's immersion.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take 40 people through this, and that's why if I do that in the next year, that's going to be a victorious year for me.
And 40 people through a coaching program that you're doing.
A total mentoring program, and it's basically simplifying what Bill and Tony taught me into one program, immersed for 12 months, and take this journey, because everybody I've done this with, I've tested it 6 times now. They've either grown their business, they've gotten a new position, or one of them lost like 45 pounds. Because her win wasn't business-wise. Her win was image.
Physical.
Image. So we worked on the mindset takes for it. So if you see me, you look at a picture of me from...
Yeah, how much weight did you lose?
I'm now at 39 pounds.
Wow. Congrats.
But more importantly, my body fat percentage is down to 14%, where it was 28%.
Sure you feel better too.
Plus I'm walking my talk.
Yeah.
Because when I was doing it with her, I was like, okay, I've got to walk my talk. I can't tell you to do it without me doing it. Because one thing I got told my audience yesterday, Sarah, is like, everything I'm talking about, I've done.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, because I tell stories because I've done it.
Sure.
Because I think to be congruent, you have to walk your talk.
Yeah.
A lot of people can talk a big game, but they can't back it up.
And if somebody's looking to stay connected with you or to get involved in your program, how do they connect with you?
Well, I'd love for them to go to LinkedIn, Dave Sanderson LinkedIn, but go to my website, davesandersonspeaks.com. We respond to everybody, right? And in that way that you'll connect with me, you can see some of the things that I'm doing. But, one of the things I've learned is, we talk to everybody. We don't say, okay, we'll talk to this guy, we're not going to talk to this girl. No. You message me, you will get a response, right? And because everybody's got uncertainty. And as we know, when we're filming this, within 5 days, this world's going to be totally uncertain, more uncertain than ever it's going to have been, right? So you better be ready for this. But there is opportunity out of uncertainty. There is something out there that you can draw on. And when you find that, is what I call, is when you find your distinct advantage, or we might call unique ability. But that's what I call, I'll leave with this. We kind of find your personal pitch, the point in time that changes everything for you. When you find that one little niche, when you're most passionate about, most gifted at, and you meld it together, and that's the point in time that will change everything. And that's what I do with people. I show people how to do this, and this my experiences, and that's why I'm a strategic coach, because there's always someone better than you.
Dave, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.